Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have a brand new deck for you, and just as a quick heads up, this is not a budget deck, although I do think it should be fairly easy to find substitutes for those expensive cards. But before that, just a quick reminder to please click like and subscribe if you enjoy my videos. We're well on our way to 1 million subscribers, and every single click counts. And today's deck is going to be centered around Pantlaza, Sun Favored. For 2 colorless, 1 red, 1 green, and 1 white, it's a legendary creature dinosaur 4/4 with whenever Pantlaza, Sun Favored, or another dinosaur enters the battlefield under your control, you may discover X, where X is that creature's toughness. Do this only once each turn. To discover, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with that mana value or less, cast it without paying its mana cost, or put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So this is a really cool commander from one of the precons, and I thought we'd make a quick deck on it. It's going to be pretty straightforward because, of course, it's going to be almost exclusively dinosaurs since this is a very heavy dinosaur tribal deck. We do have a couple of ways to double the triggers from Pantlaza, but almost everything else in the deck is just going to be stuff that works very well with dinosaurs. So without further ado, let's get started. And we're starting with Apex Altisaur. This dinosaur is really strong, seeing as it can act almost as a one-sided board wipe by removing 3 or 4 creatures from your opponents if they have a bunch of small things in play. It's also going to discover 10 with our commander out. Atsukan's Seer is pretty solid by acting as a mana rock for 3 mana, but then late game it can actually rebuy a dinosaur from our graveyard. Bonehorde Dracosaur is one of the strongest cards from the new Ixalan set, and it also happens to be a dinosaur. It's going to fit perfectly in this deck, give us some card advantage whilst creating tokens and ramping us. Bronzebeak Foragers is a really interesting card, so it's going to exile 1 thing for each opponent. That's already pretty good, and if they have some big tokens, you can just get rid of them forever. But then you can also kind of process the cards and put them into the graveyard, although you will have to pay quite a bit of mana to do so. Curious Altisaur is really solid by allowing us to draw cards whenever our dinosaurs deal combat damage to an opponent. Dinosaurs on a spaceship is a hilarious inclusion. It's really good when we suspend it because it gives us a bunch of small dinosaurs turn after turn. Giving +1/+1 vigilance and trample to all of our dinosaurs is quite good. Drawer of the Mighty is basically a 3/3 that also taps for 1 mana. For 2 mana, that's great. Earthshaker Dreadmore is going to draw us a lot of cards in this deck, particularly if we have any ETB doubler out, which is going to be absolutely insane. Speaking of ETB doublers, we have Elish Norn, Mother of Machines. She's not a dinosaur, but she does fit very well in the deck by working with our commander so that we can double up on those discover triggers. Next up we have Etali Primal Conqueror. This card is absolutely insane in normal decks, but this deck is centered around dinosaurs, which makes it even better. And if we have any sort of ETB doubler, this just becomes game breaking right on its own. Etali Primal Storm is a little bit weaker than Etali Primal Conqueror, but we do have a few ways to give it haste in the deck, which makes it very good. Galter and Mavrin is great to just plop out and trigger our commander for 12, which is fantastic, and then it's going to immediately trigger whenever we attack with any other creatures, so it's kind of like it has haste almost. Galter Primal Hunger should be coming down for very cheap in this deck, and it's a huge trampoly dinosaur. Galter Stampede Tyrant is obviously insane, particularly with all of the big, powerful cards that we have in this deck. Kishath Sun's Avatar is going to put a ton of dinosaurs onto the battlefield if we catch our opponent unawares with this. Gunnar Eyes of Gaia is going to be very good for ramping, and since we have a lot of creatures with power 5 or greater, it's actually going to help us double spell quite a bit and grow itself in the process. Quatli Poet of Unity is fantastic in this deck. First off, it's going to draw us a card, and then all of the abilities on her saga are just going to be so good with all of our dinosaurs. Hulking Raptor is a fairly hard to remove creature that can ramp us into even bigger dinosaurs. Intrepid Paleontologist does a lot of good things. It's a 2-drop that can ramp us. It can also provide graveyard hate for our opponents, and it can actually in a roundabout way allow us to recast our own dinosaurs from the graveyard at really late game. Kinjali's Caller is going to provide a lot of discounts in this deck since we're running so many dinosaurs. Marauding Raptor provides a nice discount to all of our creatures. We do have to be careful with the damage ability since we do run some small creatures, but it's nice to be able to trigger Enrage in some of our creatures as soon as they enter the battlefield. Otterbank Huntmaster is another copy of Kinjali's Caller that also can give a dinosaur haste every turn. Polani's Hatcher also gives our dinosaurs haste and provides 2 3/3 bodies as well as a 5/3/1 on its own, which is incredible value. Quartzwood Crasher should hopefully give us a fairly big creature token if we manage to damage our opponents with a bunch of trampling creatures. Ranging Raptors is good for ramping, even if it just dies and trades with something. Getting an extra basic land out of that exchange is really good. Regal Behemoth can allow us to be the Monarch, which can draw some cards and is then also going to double our mana for at least 1 turn. Regisaur Alpha is another way for us to give haste to our dinosaurs, and it's also 7 power over 2 bodies. Ripjaw Raptor has has excellent stats and is going to hopefully draw some cards as it gets enraged. Roaming Throne is going to be one of the best cards in the deck. Not only does it double the discover triggers from our commander, it's going to double so many other triggers from cards in our deck that this is going to be an absolute beating every time we play it. Runic Armosaur can sometimes provide us a nice little bit of card advantage. It also triggers our commander for 5 for only 3 mana, which is great. Scion of Calamity can deal with a bunch of artifacts and enchantments if our opponents don't have good blocks. Sunfrill Imitator can become a copy of another dinosaur when it attacks. That can be really solid, and since it retains its name, you can actually copy a legendary and not have to sacrifice it to the legend rule. So just imagine swinging with 2 Gishets or 2 Galters. Temple Altasaur is a great way to protect our dinosaurs from combat damage, but still allow them to get enraged. It's also randomly really good against something like Blasphemous Act if they don't remove this first. Thrashing Brontodon has pretty decent stats for its cost and can allow us to deal with an artifact or enchantment. Topiary Stomper comes with ramp attached, and it should be fairly easy to get to attack with it in this deck. Trumpeting Carnosaur is an absolute beast of a card that is great when hard cast and also great when you discard it early to deal with a problem creature. Verdant Sun's Avatar should keep our life total very healthy. Awakening Sun's Avatar is an absolutely fantastic card in this deck since we're running almost exclusively dinosaurs. It's basically going to be a one-sided board wipe. Wayward Swordtooth is going to allow us to play extra lands every turn, which is great. Wild Magic Sorcerer works very well with what our commander is doing by basically giving us an extra go at his ability. Wrathful Raptors is going to work very nicely by making it incredibly difficult for our opponents to block us. Yeva Nature's Herald is a card that I really like in this deck because our commander can only use his ability once per turn, but if we get to play our green dinosaurs during other people's turns, then we get to double up or even triple up on his ability per turn cycle. Zakama Primal Calamity is an absolute beast of a card that is usually very good, but it's going to be even better than normal in this deck, particularly when we get to untap all of our lands and use the mana to play other stuff. Moving on to sorceries, we have Rishkar's Expertise, which is going to be a great way to draw a bunch of cards, seeing as we're almost guaranteed to have a big creature out. For instance, we have Boros Charm and Heroic Intervention, which are going to be great for protecting our board, seeing as we don't want to have all these great big creatures and then get them destroyed. Return of the Wild Speaker is basically either going to be a buff for every creature on our board or a way to draw a ton of cards, both of which are fantastic. And moving on to artifacts, we have Herald's Horn, which is great in any tribal deck. It's going to make all of our dinosaurs cheaper and hopefully draw some cards as well. And Harmonicon is fantastic. It's just another way to double up on those triggers from our commander and all of the other triggers we have, which there's quite a few of. The Great Henge is fantastic in any deck, and as usual, it's going to do a lot of work here by drawing us a bunch of cards, and it should come down for very cheap. And the Skullspore Nexus happens to make dinosaur tokens, which synergizes very well with what our deck is doing. For enchantments, we have Garruk's Uprising, which should be drawing us a bunch of cards. It also happens to have dinosaurs in the art, which is very nice, and giving all of our dinosaurs trample also works very well. Poetic Ingenuity is incredible in this deck because it's going to make a ton of treasure tokens for us, which are going to allow us to then pump out other stuff and have really big turns. Rhythm of the Wild can give all of our dinosaurs haste, or if we don't have any good attacks, it can make them bigger so they can trigger our commander for more discover. And moving on to lands, we have Castle Garenbrig, which is a great way to ramp out our big fatties. Castle Wolfrun is a way to push through damage late game by giving one of our creatures trample. Mosswood Bridge is great since we should almost always have 10 power or more with all of our creatures. And Restless Ridgeline is a manland that's also a dinosaur, which is obviously great in this deck. So there you have it. That has been our Pantlaza Sun-favored deck tech. I don't usually like these straightforward tribal decks as much, but as I worked on this one, I thought of how fun it's going to be to double up those commander triggers and get to discover a bunch. And I kind of got excited about this deck and might try to build it if I can manage to collect some of the more expensive dinosaurs. Anyway, I'd like to hear what you think. Do you think I missed any cards, or is there some stuff that you wouldn't have included? Let me know in the comment section below. I read all comments and respond to all of them too. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care.